Hello, everyone, and thank you for joining the Ladies Be Architects Platform Developer 1 Certification Study Group. This is week 8 of content, and I will say this is our final session, and I'm excited, but I'm also very sad for this session. It's been a really great workout, I would say. A learning experience it has been. And I know that there's so much ground to cover with this certification exam. And you know what? It's been a wow of an experience. And, I didn't know what I was getting into, but it has been so fun and I've learned so much. And not just from me doing studies preparing, but also for all of you guys. Like you all have been contributing to each and every one of our sessions and bringing amazing expertise and scenarios and additional presenters and being guest speakers, and I would have never known that it would have evolved to this. So I just want to say thank you all for sticking with it the 8 weeks and for us. Okay, so for today, we are going to cover debugging and deployment. So some of the objectives we'll be including is how to monitor and access various types of debug logs, describe the capabilities and security implications of Developer Console, Workbench, and Force.com, and then look at the different processes for deploying metadata and business data, and then how do we manage the different environments and deploying, and the process for that. But last but not least, I also want to include some time to just talk about some general exam taking tips and share with you my experience, but I will definitely encourage everyone to please weigh in, because some of us may have many certifications, some of us may have one, like me. But any tips to get us to that end goal of getting certified would be most appreciated. And so we'll have some time at the end for that. And again, I'll just emphasize that debugging and deployment are very, very new topics for me. So I'm going to cover what it is that I learned from readings and trailheads, and again, more videos. And I'll share some of those resources too. And from what I learned with the Red Women Code group. So if you all want to stop me, I'm sure I may make some mistakes or have some bloopers throughout this process, because the Lord knows that I am not an expert in this area. But I will try my best for you all. And please, if I make a mistake, let me know. If you have some additional tips or tricks, share those with us as well. And if anyone has heard of any specific exam, either question types or anything like that related to debugging and deployment, put it for us so we can be mindful of what we need to focus on. So, what are debug logs? So, debug logs are used to track events that occur within our orgs. They can be used to validate an application's behavior when executing a transaction or running unit tests. Examples include system operations, processes, and errors. They are generated when, and these are the 4 things that we need to know about when they're generated. First of all, there needs to be an active user trace flag, and the keyword here is active. If you have a user trace flag but it's not active, then that's not going to work. Tests need to be run. Execute code or API requests include debugging parameters or headers. and they have to be turned on. So let's talk a little bit more about trace flags. And I just saw we have a comment come in. They need to improve flow debugging. I say that laughingly, but Brooke, I know those pains. I have overheard my colleagues talk about the exact same headaches there and how confusing it is in that. So who knows? Maybe we'll have to have an off session for flow debugging. But keep your head up. In time, I'm sure you'll figure it out. Okay, trace flags. They can be set up for either specific users, classes, or triggers. And they consist of debug level, both start times and end times, and log types. They're added or changed in the dev console, and dev is just short for developer. You would go to the debug and then the change log levels. New trace flags are created in setup. So this is not in the dev console, but in setup of when you're in your main org or your sandbox and setup there, and then debug logs. Other logging levels, like logging level set at a user trace flags, are overridden by class and trigger trace flags. And I forgot to delete these because they're on another slide. Log levels. The amount of information that you get is all going to depend on the different level that you set. The options are many, and they're included here. So they're none, error, warn info, debug, and then fine, finer, and finest. So depending on which one of these options for the log levels you choose, you either get more or less information. And I can't remember. I want to say that when we did the red women code, I think we did fine, but I am not sure like which is rule of thumb of which option to use during different scenarios. But if anyone knows some of that, I would love to know what those tips are. And then order of precedence. So the order of precedence is user trace logs, default logging levels, API header, and then last we have the log levels set by entry points. Okay, so a little bit more about debug logs. There are log categories, which means it's the type of debugging that can be set. So some examples include information from Apex code or workflows. Event types, it's going to have a combination of log category and log level, and it specifies which events. So it will actually have information. It consists of the line and the character number. Also, where that event started, the fields that were associated, and then the duration of the event. And there's two main parts that you should know about event types. The first one is the timestamp, and the second one is the event identifier. And then there are log sections. And you can access debug logs from the UI side as well. Okay. So let's talk about the different log sections. We have the header, which contains the version of API and the log category and level. The execution units is the equivalent to a transaction and contains everything that occurred from the execution underscore started to the execution finished. And both of those, and I guess I should type those in there just so we can remember, because I forgot to put them in there.
Blanca, are you talking about when you're looking at a debug log in the dev console? It's got the header, the execution units?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Okay.
And then code units are discrete units of work that are within a transaction. So, for example, you can have a trigger, you can have a web service, you can have a validation rule. It's like very specific, discrete chunk of work. And then log lines they indicate which code or rules are being executed and may include messages that are written in the debug logs. And then there's cumulative resource usage, which would be logged at the end of the code of unit that was being executed. And that could, examples of that could be like on triggers, execute, anonymous code, and web service methods. Then there's cumulative profiling, which is also logged at the end, but this time of a transaction for a DML. And DML is data manipulation language. Checkpoints. So checkpoints are used to help us debug. And in order to use checkpoints, you have to remember to have the view all data user permission. That is a requirement in order for you to use a checkpoint. Checkpoints results are captured only once, and you can have up to 5 checkpoints at a time. And we're actually going to go into the dev console in a little bit and play around in there and kind of show you some of these areas that I'm familiar with. There's not many, but we can spend some time just kind of figuring out things in that dev console live. And with checkpoints, the iteration for capture can be changed. You can overlay Apex code and SOCL statements, and you do that by editing the checkpoint properties. If you set a checkpoint in a method and it uses this at future annotation, then you have to make sure that while that code is executing, you have to make sure that the dev console remains open. You cannot like close out of it in the midst of things. You have to let the whole thing run when you're using that at future annotation. And then the checkpoint inspector includes 2 tabs. And the first one is the heap tab, and the second one is the symbols tab, and we'll talk about that in a second. They're used to investigate objects in memory at a very specific point of execution. And the heap tab displays objects in memory where you set the checkpoint. So wherever that checkpoint is executed, the objects in memory are displayed, and that includes types, instances, and states. You know, that is a good question. I didn't see heap as an acronym, but I would imagine, I feel like this is something common in programming languages, and I'm sure that there is some kind of acronym for that. Yeah, I don't know if it's a governor limit. And maybe, yes, because we do track. Brooke is probably onto something here with how it's related maybe to governor units.
Okay.
And so we know that the heap.
To confirm registration of Salesforce CRM.
Oh, I think we hear somebody typing and talking about CRM. And Olivia has here, in Apex, the heap is a reference to the amount of memory used by your reachable objects for given script and request. So we know that the heap tab includes types, which is information on classes, count, and size. And then we also know that instances as part is the heap tab will give us objects of specific type and the address and then the heap size. And then the state gives us the field and its values. These are great questions. I just saw Brooke ask if it would be for Salesforce memory, not local. Yeah, I don't know. We'll have to do some research on that one. If anyone can find that while we're going through that, that would be great. And then for the symbols tab, it gives us a display, it displays out a tree view of all the symbols in memory at that checkpoint. Capabilities and security implications. So there's like these three different pockets: the developer console, Workbench, and then Force.com IDE. These are all related to how it is that we can execute and deploy. And so here are some of how or what we can do with each one of these. Oh, I'm glad you love Workbench, Brooke. I would be so interested in doing a one-off thing like we did with Flow or Heroku, because I've only seen one demo of Workbench, but I was truly blown away, and I've meant to go back and learn more, and I haven't had time. So maybe we can have a bonus session just for Workbench at some point soon would be great. So for the developer console, you can write and edit source code, and that can be Apex code or it can be Visual Force code. And we mentioned execute anonymous. So that's available in the developer console. You can test Apex code. And then Brooke mentioned you can use Workbench for SOCL, and you can also use Developer Console to execute SOCL and SOSL. And it has debugging and debug logs, which we will look at. You can set and view checkpoints and objects, and we'll look at checkpoints too. And then just to add a little bit more about execute anonymous, some points that we should be aware of is that execute anonymous code debug logs that cover specific logic. If you use the open log option, then it is selected. If the option is selected, then it automatically opens the log inspector after code execution. So log inspector is another feature, an area for us to look at. The same code can be executed again by clicking the execute last when you're in the dev console and you're using execute anonymous. Workbench. So it's used to query, and you can use DML statements. Used to interact with REST APIs. And actually, that's the one demo that I saw. I think it was Tammy, part of Rad Women Code. She actually did a demo on how to use Workbench to interact with REST API when it was doing like social media call outs to Salesforce and capturing data, which was super cool. So you can also execute SOCL and SOSL. You can describe metadata and data. You can both deploy and retrieve metadata components with Workbench. You can test and troubleshoot APIs, and it can be used for sandbox or production. And then Brooke loves Workbench so much, she included some additional comments here for us. So she said, it's rad. And I would say, yes, the demo that I saw definitely was rad. And if I can find the link, I'll share it with you all. One of the benefits of Workbench is that you don't have to be a system admin to access it. That's true. And you have to be system admin to get to the dev console. That's actually a really good point, Brooke. And I didn't even think to bring that up. So thank you for mentioning that. And then there's a great Trailhead API Basics badge that Brooke shared from Trailhead that we should check out. I can't remember if I did that one yet or not, but we should be regardless. And Melissa uses Workbench for deployment. Cool. The many, many, many things we can do with the many, many different options we have here. And then for the force.com IDE, you can write, execute, and test source code. And again, like in the dev console, can be Apex or Visual Force. You can also write SOCL and SOSL. You can browse the metadata. You can view and edit components in metadata API. And you can also deploy from one org to another. So let's talk a little bit. We mentioned metadata when we were going over the different capabilities. And let's talk a little bit about that, on what some of our options are and how it is that, how we can achieve that. So you can move metadata between different environments. And these are some of the most, I don't know, probably most common, I guess, ways that you do it. So there's developer edition to the developer edition. You can do a related sandbox. And here, I could have broke this out in another one, but I just think this makes it a little bit easier. You can either send metadata to related sandbox or a related production org. And then for an unrelated org, you can send metadata to another unrelated org. And the options for doing this are change sets and the force.com migration tool. We already mentioned the force.com IDE. And again, Workbench. Oh, and unmanaged packages. So let's talk a little bit about the production release cycle. And the first thing that I put up here, very big in orange, is something that we cannot forget, is that we need at least 75% coverage. Again, that's the minimum, but that is not what our end goal should be. We should always be striving for 100. And I think that Mark shared with us that 100 is not not always achievable, but we should try. Um, and that it could vary, right? We mentioned that it could vary. You may have 75% coverage or more. Maybe you're just above 75% in your sandbox. And then let's say you go to deploy, and then for some reason that number drops, it's not going to deploy. Um, then you're not going to be able to push those changes. So some of the things that we think about for the release cycle is meet testing requirements. So we have to make sure that we are very mindful about how we go about meeting the requirements. We would create a change set. We would upload a change set from the test to production. And we would validate and deploy the change set, which will run all tests. And if you don't meet the requirement of 75 for coverage, or if any of your tests you're not going to be able to deploy. And for change sets, I will point out that I did watch a video that was a little bit older that's available on YouTube, and I have it in our resources slide. It's kind of lengthy, but I would say for like someone who's new to this and hasn't actually created a change set, I think it breaks down very nicely. How do you go about doing that, and what do you need to know in order to do it properly? Like there's certain things you have to do beforehand, or you have to make sure it's configured a certain way in order for you to create the change sets. And it looks like we have some comments that came in. Jennifer says, validate the change set a day before the production deploy, not right before. In case your validation fails, you have time to make changes to correct it. Yeah, that is also, I think, a tip that may be in one of these slides. I can't remember if I got it in there or not, but you should definitely give yourself some time. Brooke says, we usually have a bunch of test classes to update to. Validate between sandbox deploys too. So a little bit more about change sets. So change sets are a way of deploying customizations between your sandbox and, production orgs through what's called deployment connections, which is part of how you set up and configure the changes. You have to establish these deployment connections. Change sets are available in Enterprise, Performance, Unlimited, and database.com. And one important thing to note here is that you only move metadata from one org to another. You're not moving data records. Oh, and these are actually carryovers. Sorry about that. And then here we have a little bit about what are the options with change sets. Can everyone hear me? Yes, okay, good. Sorry, I have a weird ringing in my headset, and I don't know what it is, but I'm glad you can hear me okay. So some of the options are default. So default have no tests are run for sandboxes, and all tests are run for productions. And then here, Brooke mentioned local before. If we do run local tests, all local tests, should I say, except install packages. And then we have run all local tests. So this means everything, including installed packages, whereas that's a little bit different than this run local test because that one, again, does not include managed packages or install packages. And then run specific tests. So run specific tests are only for specific test classes, and they have to be executed with a minimum of 75% coverage. Some considerations we should be mindful of when it comes to chain sets. If your deployment doesn't complete for whatever reason, that entire transaction gets rolled back. And all dependent components should be added to your change set. So when I talked about, mentioned the video that I watched, it includes the whole process of it because it could be pretty lengthy. And there's a little bit of back and forth between, let's say, for instance, your production and your sandbox. So this is something that gets walked through entirely. And again, I will reference in the slide deck for resources which one relates to breaking down step by step how do you go about this. And then you can actually see what they mean by dependent components and how do you go about adding those. And permissions are also added as a component. You may clone a change set, but you cannot, no. You cannot use a change set to rename or delete a component. If that's something that you need to do, it would have to be after you deploy in a manual that you have to just complete on your own. And then here, Brooke mentioned the great thing about time, and I think Jennifer did too. Always include additional time in your schedule in case things go wrong, you have to make changes, or if there's anything changes, or if there's anything that caused delays. Make sure you cushion in more time in whatever your schedule is. If you guys have a release schedule, make sure that you always have that cushion time. You need some, cushion room in case some parts of it go faster, some parts of it go slower, or you have to make modifications. And Jennifer adds a comment, very, very good tip here. Depending on how many test classes you have in your org, your deployment may take a while to run all the tests. Yes, I also heard this, and in multiple areas, actually, I heard it and read it, that the time can vary, definitely. So if you run validation and it passes, you can then do a quick deploy in production, and that way you do not have to run them again. Interesting. That's a good note. I'm going to keep this one down for myself. Thank you, Jennifer. And there are some limitations. Oh, wow. Brooke says ours take about a day to go through all the tests. So timing, I think that's a good thing too, right? Sometimes when you make a lot of enhancements, what you're used to may get thrown off. And so you may want to make sure you have a little bit more cushion time than you would originally plan. I will mention that our org is looking at making a lot of changes post we have two entities that we're separating, and so there's a lot of technical debt that we have to get rid of within our Salesforce org. And this is something that we'll have to take into consideration. You know, what we are normally used to in times for our releases, we have to look at that and cushion in more time because of all the changes that we're going to be doing. So that's a great point, Brooke. Thank you for bringing that up. Back to change settings. Not all metadata is supported, and change sets can hold a group of components that should be deployed, but what you cannot do is specify this is the order for deployment. So if you need to specify for your components, this is the order of deployment, then you're probably going to need to add additional change sets so that you can set that up, the order. And Jennifer says Salesforce does not allow for blackouts of deployments, unlike other applications. Mm-hmm. And it's an all or none model. You can't say, I want to deploy this piece or I want to deploy these pieces. It really is going to be all or nothing. And Brooke brings up a good comment here that you can inactivate users so that they can't get into the system while you're deploying. Or you can inactivate them, but freeze them out. Yeah, those are good points.
Yeah, I'm sorry, a little convoluted, but we actually have pretty major deployments. Sometimes we can't allow the users to get in there to change anything because it would affect, some financial stuff. So we have to lock them out. So you can do that. And we don't
Yeah.
inactivate them. I think they do something with the profiles. They set the profiles to read only, or set login times where they can't get in, or something like that.
Mm-hmm. And so that's good. I would be interested in just knowing, like, from an admin standpoint, how do you communicate that out? Do they know that, per your timeline, or do you reach out to them each time you're going to do this?
You need to have a communication plan for major deployments like that, and give users enough warning. It depends on how long the blackout period is. For
Mm-hmm.
us, at the beginning of our fiscal year, it's a week, and so that affects
Oh.
timesheets, that affects a lot of things. So we give people about a month in advance, and we start a couple of communications every week. Hey, don't forget, there's a blackout coming. Hey, don't forget, get all your stuff done. Hey, don't forget.
Mm-hmm.
So you got to have a communication plan for major stuff.
Yeah, that's a good point. And I think a week is good at minimum, right? And yes, you do have to remind folks plentiful times because some people are out on vacation or out sick or they just didn't read the email. So that brings up a really good point. You got to emphasize it multiple times to them. But thanks for bringing that up, Brooke. Oh, okay. We're not going to go over exam taking tips yet. Let's take a look at. Let me switch here to another window. I think, oh, where did I put it? Did I close it out? No, I didn't close it out. Here we go. Oh, window. Ha, there it goes. Okay, so can everyone see the Dev Console open? Okay, great. So here I just opened up an Apex class, and I'm not going to walk through all this code, but I'm just opening it up to kind of let us play around with some of the things that we talked about. So we talked about debug, right? So up here, you'll see when you're in the Dev Console, you have this menu area. And the third one in is debug. And here you have a lot of different options for debugging. So for instance, we talked about changing your log levels. So if you wanted to change log levels, you would come down here. And then here, this can get pretty intricate, and everyone, I think either you have to follow your protocol of what you have in the workplace, or sometimes when you're new and you're playing around with code on your own, you have to kind of play around with what works for you. Because when we actually had this demo to us by our coaches from Rad Women Code, there's a lot of different settings that you can change with the different levels. And sometimes you have to figure out what works best for your needs. But if you wanted to, you can come in here to the change log levels um, and add or remove what you want to change. I'm not really going to change anything in here, so I just left them as they were when we did this for our Rad Women course earlier this year. So I'm going to keep them that way because I don't really know what I'm doing in there yet. Back to the debug, we actually talked a little bit about using Execute Anonymous as part of the Dev Console. And we mentioned that you can do execute last, which would run the same code that you executed again, and you can run it over and over and over. I will say not so much for Apex and working with Salesforce, but back in the undergrad days when we had to debug our programs, sometimes we were there for hours. I hate to say it, but debugging is a process. It's not something that you do in a few minutes. This is something that you do over and over and over again. And it takes time. And sometimes you'll debug a little bit one day and then come back another day and debug again. And a week later, and you do some refactoring and you debug again. And it's an ongoing process. It's just part of life when it comes to coding. And then open execute anonymous window. So when you do that, you can pick and choose how much code you want to execute. If I came to this class and I selected everything, I could just select it all, Control C to copy, click in this execute anonymous window, and I could paste it in there. And then I can leave the open log here, this checked on. Um, that's what we referred to before in one of our slides is the open log. And then you can click execute. Or if you had a certain lines highlighted, you can execute only what you have highlighted. In this case, I just want to run all of it. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to click execute. And now you'll see that I have a new tab open. So this was my class that I had, and now this is my log for the execute anonymous code that I executed, and it gives me the timestamp. And if I look in here, you'll see that I have a timestamp, I have event, and I have details column. This is all part of the execution log. So when I was breaking down in the slides, what are the different pieces of the different types of debugging features and tools, this is what we were talking about. Um, and you can always too, this one, I don't think it had, it's telling us a little bit information like we didn't run any SOCL queries. We didn't run any SOCL queries. If you had some kind of errors, you would actually get like line numbers of where in your code you had errors. And then basically you would go back to your class and then look at the line number and see, try to figure out what went wrong. And so I actually did this by accident, but if any of you all noticed, I clicked over here on the left in this gray bar that has the numbers, which indicates the line. And when I clicked in there, I got a little dot next to the line 91. So I didn't do this intentionally, but this is actually a checkpoint. When I was mentioning you can set up to 5 checkpoints, this is how you would do that. You would just find the part. So like, let's say, okay, I want to run my code, and then at, I don't know, for instance, at line 98 and 91, even though 91 is blank, so I guess that's a bad example. Let's pick, I don't know. I guess this is all a bad example because I have a whole bunch of comments here, but 65. If I click 65 and 98, that means I have 2 checkpoints. So when I'm running my, when I'm executing this, what I'll get is at those checkpoints, it kind of stops and it will pull the information for that specific time. And again, if we go back to our slide deck earlier, which I'm not going to switch to right now, but the checkpoints will give us the information about like the objects at that specific time, types, instances, and states, and so forth. So this is a checkpoint. And you'll notice that down here in the developer console, this tab that's orange is now selected because Dev Console knows that I just set checkpoints. So it automatically is switching to that tab for me. It's kind of smart like that. It's just trying to help me out because it said, oh, you just set a checkpoint. So let me put some focus on the checkpoint tab so that you can see additional information. And then here on the right, you'll see that I have the specific locations. Remember, you can have up to 5 checkpoints. Here I have 2, line 65 and 98. Let's see, what else did we want to look at? In test, here you have more options for how you want to run your test. You can do a new run, you could do a rerun. We mentioned Brooke, and I'm not too familiar with, but I know we were talking about test suites. And here we have a suite manager. We can set up new tests, new suites. We can run a new suite. So these, I've never really actually been in those areas, but they relate to our previous session where we were talking about test suites. And then workspaces. Workspaces, you can customize how your dev console looks, where things are laid out. That is your workspace. And so you can decide if you want to create a new one. I haven't really played around with how I like my dev console to look and where I like things to be because I am not really running too much in my dev console, but that's something that you guys may find may be helpful for you. And where do you set debugging on a specific user? That is a great question. I don't know if you set it in the dev console here, or if that would be a setting we do on the user interface side of Salesforce. Does anyone know about that? I think it. I I think it is in the user record in the org, but I'm not a whole bunch. Oh, debug logs in the setup. So that would be in the UI, and we can take a look at that after the Dev Console. Thanks, Jen, for putting that out there. And Olivia says she thinks we can do it in both places. Cool. Okay. I think we did test. We did workspace. So here we have some other tabs. And so one of them that I want to mention is this query editor. So I know Brooke and many of you guys, I think Melissa and someone else mentioned they like Workbench. And I know that in the one demo that I saw, they did show how simple it can be to build a query with Workbench, but you can also do it here. So if you wanted to write a SOCO or a SOSO query, you would pretty much just type it in here, and then you can run it and see what the results are going to be. View state, I really don't remember too much about this. I'm trying to remember if it related to something, and it did, but I just can't think of it right now. But query editor is definitely one place we spend some time in. Checkpoints, tests. Of course, I cannot forget to include tests, and I'm going to make this bigger so that we can see more of it. But here, to the right, you'll see that it says overall code coverage. So here, we actually have a breakdown of all of our different classes that I have in my org. And it tells me line by line the name of the class and what percentage of code coverage that I have. And then if you look here in the lines column, it actually tells you how many lines of the total line amount. So the total line amount is what you see over here on the right-hand side. So account trigger has 41 lines. Right now I have 0 lines of 41 that are being tested. My percentage is 0. Which this is a perfect example of what you do not want to do. But like I said, I don't really do much in this Dev Console, so I don't really have anything run. But if I were using my Dev Console a lot, you can see the status of each and every one of your classes and triggers here, and what the code coverage is. And then again, your logs. So here's another area where you can look at your logs. And then let's take a second to switch back, because Brooke had a great question, and I'm glad that Jen was here to remind me. I am going to switch over to the UI side of Salesforce so that we can see where we can find some of these things as it pertains to the debug logs. Okay, so can folks see my setup area in my org?
Yes.
Okay, great. So if I come up here to the little gear and I go to setup, which I'm already in, but if you weren't already in setup, that's how you would find it. And then I click in the quick find debug log, as Ben mentioned. You can then click on that. And then here you'll see that you can set up different debug logs. And so right now I have a user trace flag, which we spoke about in the slide deck. And here's my name. It's telling me the log type and the start date and the expiration date. And you can set up different ones in here. I know we set a few up actually. There are some limitations, and I don't know why I didn't write them down. Does anyone remember offhand? There's limitations on like how big your logs can be. If anyone can remember that, I think that would probably.
I've run into that with it's like 250 megs or something.
I think it was. Yeah, that sounds very familiar.
Anything over that, it won't take it anymore. And I thought it doesn't it delete a log after 24 hours or after 30 days or what's the time frame that it keeps the log? I'm looking at the warning message about that.
I'm wondering if specify for your org
Oh, okay.
how long, because I know like for us, we do 30 minutes for some, and then for others we might do like a 24-hour. So I think it depends on like how much is going to be happening during that time, because like for instance, when we set our debug logs, we were having some integration issues, and so we turned it on, and instead of us just looking at the logs for an hour, we accidentally looked for 24 hours, and then what happened was it took up all of our space, and the debug logs that we were running for other things, they couldn't record because there was nothing there. So we actually had to go and like clear them out. And then we had to make adjustments. So I think it's all dependent on, what your organization preference is. And then it could be for different scenarios, you have a different time set. But that is a very good question, Brooke. And then there was another area that I wanted to go to. I think it was, I'm trying to remember where it was. Does anyone remember? Maybe Jen, do you know where we established the change sets again? Because I forgot to write it down.
Can you just search for change sets?
Yeah, that's what I was trying to do. Oh, maybe I didn't type it in right. Yeah. Yeah.
Okay, I'm at a loss.
Yeah, where would it be? Notcher and lightning. Oh, that's a good point. Let me just switch back. If we switch, maybe then I can find it in there. I think Olivia has a different option, maybe an app setup. I know it's in the video, so I will definitely point you guys to the video. It is lengthy, but like I said, for me, for someone who's never established a change set before, it really did show a lot. We have connected apps, but that's not what I'm looking for. Okay. I don't want to waste too much time because I don't know where this is, but I will point you guys in the direction of the video. So let me switch back
I think you
to
searched for
our.
deployment in a quick find.
Hi, Mark. So glad you can join us. Oh, and Jennifer says she uses a new tool called Copado. Interesting. And Brooke says they use an IBM tool. The many, many options we have here. Okay, so let me switch back. I'm actually going to do this in reverse order. I'm going to cover the resources first, and then I will do our exam taking tips, and then we can all just chat in general about preparing and any tips or anything. But right now, what I want to show you is actually Women Code Heroes, which I will always shout out because it's such a great blog, and all the blogs written on there I think are from Karen Jamison, who's founder of Rad Women Code. There's an awesome developer council quick start. So I just did a quick in and out, just highlight, but she has a great breakdown of developer council and how you can get started with that. There's also a few resources from salesforce.com that might be helpful when it comes to looking at like how do you configure your debug logs, how do you view them, and what do things mean in there. So this monitor debug logs is really good. This is the YouTube video. It's called From Sandbox to Production by Jojn. And again, it's pretty lengthy, but watch it in pieces if you want. I watched it and then I paused and then I tried to find things and then I wrote notes and then I started it back up again. And so take your time with it. It's on YouTube. You can watch it as many times as you want. Oh, and Mark says you can't do change sets in developer org. That's why. Thank you. I knew I wasn't going crazy there. I know I watched it in the video. I was like, man, I can't be getting that old. And I did have more coffee tonight. So anyhow, thanks for pointing that out, Mark. And then to learn a little bit more about the checkpoints tab again, there's great information on documentation by salesforce.com. Here is a link to Workbench. I will try to find a recording of, I think it was Tammy who did it, and I want to say it was part of either a Women Who Dev session or part of a which was a Women Who Dev session. I'll try to see if I can find the recording, but she did a great demonstration on how to use Workbench to integrate with REST APIs. And then deploy from sandbox with change sets. There's another resource on Salesforce. There's also a whole guide that Salesforce has for production release lifecycle. So that may be a little bit much for the certification exam. I'm not saying you guys have to look at all of that for the exam. I'm just saying for the topic of debugging and deployment, these are resources you want to go to. And Mark said, definitely spend some time with Workbench. It gives you some great ways of looking at and playing around with Salesforce metadata underneath things. Yes, Brooke, great point. It helps teach you SACO. Couldn't agree more. And I love the smiley face. So I'm going to cover some exam taking tips. And you all can feel free to weigh in as much as you want, because I am definitely not an expert in this. I've only taken one certification exam. I'm happy to say I passed it on the first try, but I've only taken one. But just some things in general to know about taking Salesforce certification exams. You have two options. One option is to do it on site, like at a facility that's, you can search which facility is approved by them. And like I went to a local community college and I took it there. Usually they don't let you bring anything in. So like if you have a purse, sweater, water bottle, whatever, they make you put it away before you enter the room to take the exam. So know that. There's also an online. So if you do the online version, I have not done that before, although I am considering it for this exam. Um, Online, you have to make sure that you have a webcam, and I believe it has to be at like a certain angle so that they can watch you while you're taking the exam, because it is a proctored exam, and so they need to be able to see a certain amount of area while you're taking the exam. And I don't have experience in how much or what's a good webcam, but if anybody has any tips on that, please feel free to share. They may make you move it or move the mouse or other items on cue. Good to know. Thanks, Mark. I don't know. I think I feel a little bit more nervous about taking it online at home. But Melissa says it's easy to do it online. So we'll see. But those are your options: on site, at a facility that they specify, or online, and no paper online. That's a good point. So on site, they do give you like, I don't know, 3 or 4 sheets of paper and a pencil. And that's about it that you can take in with you. Sophie says she loves the on site paper. I do too. Brooke says, oh, rats, I need the paper to help my brain. Yeah. So the paper for me, because I still have mama brain, um, I like to write things down because I will memorize. I will have them memorized, but then I think part of like being there taking an exam, like I forget or I kind of freeze up sometimes. So I'll try to write down like most important things or just, quick acronyms or spell out that will help me, remember things. Um, but everyone's different. Melissa says at home she feels a little bit more relaxed. And Jennifer says, I like the paper to think through some questions. Yeah. And I actually use the paper too at the end, um, when I had to go back and go through the ones that I marked for review. And I actually noted how many I changed. And then I could gauge my comfort level with if I wanted to hit submit or not after that. Yeah, Olivia, she said the same thing. I liked the paper to tally the ones I feel confident about. hmm Great points. Um, Also, there's an option. You can take the Salesforce.com pretest for PD1 certification. I think the pretests are normally like $20. I did do the pretest for my admin certification exam, and I would say that I did it the night before I went to go take the actual certification. I don't think the night before was the best thing for me. Yes, the pretests are hosted on Crypterion. So yeah, you can get to it from the Salesforce.com certification, and they have like a landing page for each certification, and it says pretest on there, and it's a hyperlink. Um, and then you register for it just like you would for the on-site or online actual exams. You pick a time and you do your pretest. I will say that the pretests allow for a very good, I would say, as close experience as you can get to the types of questions that you're going to get, um, and become acquainted taking the test on that platform. So I mentioned that the admin was the first one I took. So it was the first one I took for Salesforce, the first one I took on that platform. And I wasn't really familiar with, how the questions were. I was afraid maybe they're going to be too hard, maybe they're going to be, too confusing, and are they going to be tricking us? And I had all of these questions going into it, but the pretest really helped me open up my eyes to see how it would actually feel like. You get to mark the ones you want for review the same way you would the actual exam, you get timed, and you can do the mark for review and the pretest. So it's as close as you can get to taking the actual certification exam. And Jennifer, yes, it does tell you what percentage you got right. Oh, Mark says he doesn't think there's a pretest for anything other than admin. Really? I thought I saw PD1. I'm going to go look now. Wow. Okay, so I guess I won't spend much time on that if we don't have one, but we'll have to go look just to double check. And Brooke brought up another good resource, Focus on Force. FocusOnForce.com is also an excellent resource. I want to say that I used that. I used Mike Wheeler for the admin exam as well, although I don't think Mike Wheeler offers the platform developer one. But Focus on Force, you can choose whether you just want to purchase the practice test, and I think you get a number of them. I know for the admin, I got 6 different tests. They're timed. And they have that kind of feature of where you have to select 3 or select 2, and it's timed. And yes, Brooke brought up a very good point that they do break down the percentage, and that helps to focus on the weak areas. And I would say the pretest did that for me too. I am not going to lie, when I took the pretest, I pretty much bombed it. I don't know if it's because I took it at like 10 o'clock at night and my brain was already mush, but I didn't want to just go into the certification exam, especially not my first one, without having some experience with the pretest. Olivia says, wow, yeah, she can't find the pretest. Okay, so maybe then look at Focus on Force for the practice test. I think his are $20 as well. And try it that way. Jennifer says she used the Focus on Force for the platform app builder. Mark says he looked on Web Assessor and it's only admin 201. Okay. And yeah, Brooke or Mark confirmed Focus on Force has 4 exams for PD1 specific for $20. Take time to read. So I will say that I have to slow myself down sometimes, because what I caught myself doing is that I'll read the question and my mind's already trying to think of the answer before I fully read and comprehend what it is that they're asking, which is bad. So I really had to train myself to slow down and not try to just go in and start answering before I fully read it. And sometimes it meant reading it 2 or 3 times. I think that the questions can be tricky, and sometimes you just have to decipher what parts of the question you need that may be helping you out. And Jennifer put in the chat box, look for keywords. Definitely. Take time in reading them. Don't rush through reading them. And it may be that you read it once or you read it twice, you answer, maybe you mark for review if you're not feeling, really confident with your answer, and then you come back to it later and read it again. Mark says, and easy that you know are wrong. So focus on the right ones. Yeah, that's a good point. I mentioned mark for review. Mark as many as you want. What I did was I marked it if I didn't feel a really high kind of percentage of, okay, I'm confident in that. I'm not going to look at it anymore. I know that I got it. When I went back after I took the exam, I think I had like 20 minutes left on the clock. And a part of me was feeling nervous, and I was like, oh no, I'm not going to pass this test anyway, so I should just go home already because it's too early in the morning. But I said, no. Think about what Mike Wheeler said and use all the time you have and go back and review the ones that you marked for review and do that. Review them. And so I did that. And I will say that I didn't change every one of them, but I did change a few of them. And Sophie has here a comment. I use the paper to mark out each question 1 to 65 before I start. Then I go mark whether I'm 100% certain or 75% or 50-50. If I'm not 100% certain, I mark the question for review and jot down a word or two on what the question is about. Sometimes that's helpful later on when other question jogs your memory. That's a good point. As you take the test, there may be a question down the line that reinforces your train of thought of what you were thinking as it related to another. So that's awesome. Thanks, Sophie. Brooke says, Mark, can you review my test? I love it. And Sophie says, then towards the end, I can tally how many I'm certain on and how many of the 75% or 50% I need to make up the pass mark. Yeah, those are really great tips, Sophie. Thank you so much for sharing those. And I will say this is something that I tend to do sometimes because I often feel like I overanalyze things and I make it more complicated than it is sometimes. So this is also something that I'm retraining or reprogramming my brain. I've been doing a lot better at it, but don't second guess yourself. Go with your gut. Like, Sophie said, she'll write down her percentage for each question. If she's 100% certain, 75 or 50. If you know you're feeling 100, don't even look at it again. Just go with your gut. And, if you're at that 75, think about it a little bit. Maybe you changed it after you marked it for review because you knew that you were 75% certain. But, don't go back twice or a third time and change it again and change it again. Like, don't do that because I think sometimes then you overcomplicate things and it could leave you with, getting the wrong answer because you're second guessing yourself all the time. And then sometimes, hey, if you're 50-50, do process of elimination of ones that you think are not the right answers. And then just go eeny, meeny, miny, mo with the other two. No, I mean, that was a joke, but, just look for keywords. Think about, oh yeah, those don't sound right because I know that this is not part of options, that doesn't even exist. Or, maybe the question is, tell me 3 answers that are not the correct ones. Look for certain keywords. Let's see. I think Jennifer says, agreed, go with your gut. Or else you start changing answers. You answered right. Most definitely. And it's not easy to do this, folks. I'll tell you, it's hard for me to push myself. But, if I spent X amount of time studying, and Lord knows we have, go with your gut. Just believe in yourself and give it the best that you have. Mark says, I just want them to be more like trailhead quizzes. Yeah, where at least one of the answers is funny. I do love that part about trailhead. That is great. And, everyone, please note that it is not, and here I emphasize not, uncommon if you do not pass on your first attempt, okay? These exams are very challenging, and they're challenging for a reason. They want to make sure that we know the platform and we understand, the foundational concepts as it relates to each and every type of certification exam there is. So make sure that, you give yourself some credit. If you pass on the first attempt, woohoo, mega party. If you don't, that's okay. That puts you one step closer to passing. So don't be intimidated, if you don't pass on the first time. And just know that there are many people out there that have to take it multiple times, and there's nothing wrong with that. Um, let's see, we have some comments here. One of the trail trainers at Trailhead DX took the PD exam 5 times. Yeah, and he's a trainer now. hmm That's a great point. I love that, Brooke. Thank you so much for sharing that. And Mark says one of the guys who was teaching at Trailhead DX, who is a developer and was teaching the intro to development for admins, took 3 tries to pass PD1. Yeah. Oh, and Mark says, okay, so it was 5. It was the same trainer. Anyhow, point is, even the best of us don't pass on the first time. And sometimes we do. There's no biggie, there's no shame. Like I said, if you have to take it again, that's okay. Each time you get closer and closer and closer to passing. So that's, all that matters. Um, all right. Does anyone else have any other exam taking tips? I didn't put these on in there, but they are a little bit kind of elementary kind of school day things. Make sure you get good sleep the night before. So I was considering staying up all night because I took the pretest pretty late. I want to say it was like 10 o'clock when I started it the night before. And I didn't do so great on the pretest. I pretty much bombed it, like I said. And I was like, okay, maybe I should just stay up all night and keep studying and then go straight to take the exam. But I said, that's bad. Think about the good old days when I was, in school, high school, and, you know, college. And I had to give myself some time to sleep and let my brain re-energize, get a fresh, mindset in the morning, or, in the day, whatever time you decide to take the exam. But give yourself some sleep the night before. And if you can, do try to eat something, because 2 hours or it's not 2 hours. I think an hour and 10 minutes or something like that. But if you're doing it on site, you got to drive to the location, you have to check in, you have to put your stuff away and then sit down. So, definitely get something in your stomach. Make sure you have a snack or a meal. Mark says, time, sleep, awake, and cramming. Yeah. Um, yeah, so that's about it that I have for exam taking tips. I will say I was hoping to actually take the exam before tonight's session. Um, I don't feel so confident because work has been very busy, and with the baby getting sick and stuff, it's just been a little bit rough the last few weeks. So I think I want to give myself a little bit more time to study. But I do plan on taking the exam before the end of this month. So as soon as I take the exam, I will most definitely, jot down notes when I leave and share whatever I can remember or any tips that I can think of for you all. Some of you may already be taking it soon, and that's great. I mean, do whatever makes sense for you. Don't feel like you have to rush. Um, you know, go with your gut. You know yourself better than anyone, and only you can gauge your preparedness for this exam. Brooke, how long will we have access to the Google Drive? That's a great point. So all of our stuff is hosted on Ladies Be Architects Google Drive, and I don't think they put a limit on how long, but I'll ask. I know they have stuff up there from other study groups because they hold monthly study groups, and they're still there, and time has passed. So I don't think they'll be deleting our stuff anytime soon. But I'll check Brooke just in case. Oh, and Brooke says she's taking the exam next Thursday. All right, we're going to be sending great vibes to you, Brooke. Mark says, one of the best things I heard from Witness Success, don't say negative or discouraging things to yourself that you wouldn't say to your best friend. That is a great point. If you wouldn't be hard on them in a situation, don't be hard on yourself. I love that. And I do feel like I'm one of those people that is always way more harder on me than I am than anybody else. Yeah, so that's a good point. Jennifer says, I stopped studying the night before to do something relaxing instead. Don't look at your notes right before. Either you know it or you don't. And I couldn't agree more with that statement, Jennifer. Thank you. Okay. So I want to say, and I know we've done shout outs on Twitter and in our Slack workspace, but congratulations, because we already have 4, not 1, not 2, not 3, but we have 4 Ladies Be Architects Platform Developer 1 study group members that have passed the exam and have achieved the certification. And Mark, woohoo, shout out, he was number 1 and he took the beta and he didn't have it planned, right, Mark? And you didn't think you passed, and you did. And then Hema came in next. And then we had Kelsey, she passed too. And most recently, just a few days ago, we had Asan who passed. So already people are passing the exam. Everyone, go with, what you feel. If you feel you're prepared, just go for it. Believe in yourself. Just take the plunge. Gotta have a little bit of faith and just do it. Jennifer says she's going to start studying after Dreamforce. Yeah, I heard that too. So I will check on the resources for the Google Drive, but I don't anticipate that they're going to get rid of our stuff anytime soon. But I will confirm and I will let you all know. And then I just want to say thank you, everyone, each and every one of you. It has been an incredible experience. I will say that I had no idea where this was going. I had no idea what it was going to be like. I really didn't have any clue, and it has been a tremendous and a super wonderful experience, meeting everyone and hearing and learning from each and every one of you. And I'll have to admit, you guys are what kept me going, because the second I got the new job and life got busy with family things coming up here and there, and life throws you curveballs and it's hard to get your time management in. But you guys kept me going, so thank you everybody for staying with me all this time and keeping me motivated. And you know what? Like this image says here, we have squad goals, and we are going to reach our goals, each and every one of us. And I look forward to seeing posts, whether it's tomorrow or next Thursday, Brooke, or next month, or in 3 months or in a year or whenever you take the PD1 certification exam, I'm going to be looking forward to your posts, seeing them on Twitter, or send me an email if you're not on Twitter. Yeah, and let's stay in touch. This was so fun. And I really, really, really love this experience. And I think that, we owe a great big thank you to Ladies Be Architects, who supported me and us to do this and provided us with all of these wondrous tools for us to meet virtually. And thank our allies, for everyone who has produced resources, Trailhead and the Plural site crew. We have Don Robbins and David Liu and Matthew Lacey and everyone, who's developed materials and resources and help people like us learn. Because we wouldn't be able to get this far if it weren't for them. So thank you, everyone. And good luck to you all. Big shout out to everyone. Good luck. And I think that's a wrap, unless anyone has any last minute questions or comments they want to add. Catch you on the flip side. You too, Brooke. Mark, yeah, great point. Yeah, we'll still hang around the Slack. The Slack isn't going anywhere. In fact, this brings up a good point. I will check in with Ladies Be Architects because they also have another Slack channel with, I think, all of their study groups, the past ones that they've held. So I will check in with them and see if we can get added into there as well. All right, everyone, I'm going to stop the recording. Thank you so much and good luck to you all.